Before we start our regular board meeting, we will have the tax levy public hearing. So, is there anyone here to address the board regarding the tax levy? No, wait. Mrs. Luton, no one contacted you today, or okay? All right. That meeting is adjourned, or the hearing is adjourned. Now I'll ask that you stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, this is always an exciting time of the year with the beginning of school, and we have some special recognitions tonight surrounding that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ritter.
Tonight we have an opportunity to meet our new leadership at our sites, and they were sitting in the back. They're so humble, so we moved them up to the front to give them a little more ego. Anyway, to introduce them at this time, I'd like to have Dr. Hackenworth, if you would come up first. Or who? Dr. Anderson. Dr. Anderson. Okay, Dr. Anderson, please.
Good evening. Always exciting to introduce our new elementary leaders. And we have some, we'll start with the familiar faces in new places. We have two, and so when I say their name, I'll ask them to stand up so you can see who they are. We have Stephanie Young, who is now the principal at Delaware Elementary. She came over from Truman, and we're excited to bring her skill set to the fantastic community there at Delaware. Also, we have Dr. Laura Hopper, who is now the principal at York Elementary, and it's also her birthday today, so happy birthday to
wow,
Laura.
Thank you for spending it with us.
I bought her a cupcake not using district funds. I use Steve Choda's funds for that. So, and besides that, we have some new faces in familiar places. Crystal Majors is our principal at Sequiota. She's been an assistant principal with us last year and a classroom teacher before that. We're excited to have her service at Sequiota. We have Jo Ellen Travis is the new principal at Truman Elementary. We stole her from Pleasant Hope, and excited to have her. She has an escort with her. Her daughter Bentley is here.
Where does she go to school?
She goes to school at Sequiota, so she actually has her mom, the principal, and Crystal Majors is her principal, and so she brought two principals with her tonight. Pretty exciting.
Might be a record.
And then we have Josh Holt is the new principal at Portland Elementary. He's returned to the promised land of SPS after going to Hollister for a year, and we're excited to have him join us. So that is our new elementary leaders, and we appreciate them, and so excited for this year under their leadership. Thank you so much.
Introducing the secondary.
Mr. Schmitz.
Mr. Schmitz, please.
We also have the opportunity to introduce some veterans and new places with us this evening. And so at Glendale High School, Dr. Natalie Caldwell. Thank you. And at Kickapoo High School is Kelly Allison. And at Studi Alternative Center is Justin Dickinson. In a new role. Yes, sir. Sure.
Justin also has some pretty exciting news this week. Sunday, his wife delivered their second child, Reagan, beautiful little girl, so he brought her home today. So,
Wow, great.
it's still short for work.
And he's here.
Still
He's still here. Also at Westport Middle School, or K-8, is Gary too. And new in the leadership role as a principal at Jarrett Middle School is Rob Kroll. And at Hickory Hills Middle School, again K-8, is Sarah Odom. And last but certainly not least, at Pershing K-8 is Pam Holmes. We had a lot of leadership change this year, and we're really excited with the team we have. They're definitely getting it going. So please congratulate them.
I don't know if any other board members will have comments, but I'd just like to thank each of you for your commitment to our students and to our families and to the faculty. For those of you who are new to Springfield Public Schools, welcome. We're glad that you've chosen our district to continue your careers. For those of you who are in new positions but have been with us a while, as a board member, it always is very satisfying to me to see people within the system move to different opportunities. And I think that because of our size, we're able to provide people throughout their careers opportunities for advancement, opportunities for different types of schools. So thank you for making that commitment. Anybody else have anything? And thank you for being here tonight. And Laura, thank you for spending your birthday with us. You get extra brownie points for that. So, and please do not feel obligated to stay for the rest of the meeting. We understand that this is a busy time of year for you. So, yeah.
Thank you all. Good job.
Pretty excited.
Are there any modifications to the agenda? Okay, with that, we'll go into my president's report. I will say it was kind of different last week. It was first week of school, and I was actually on vacation with my family. I don't have any students in the public schools anymore, so that was a little odd. But I know a lot of you have been out into the schools, and I'll give you a chance to report on that. I will say that at the beginning of the month, I had the privilege of attending and speaking at both the ribbon-cutting ceremonies at Jeffries and at Westport, and certainly it was very satisfying to see those facilities and the improvements that have been made there. And you know, we know that learning environments are important to not only students but also to faculty. So again, thank you to our community for making those projects possible. And then I'll just, if there's anybody else who's visited schools and wants to report out, I think that would be a good thing. I know, Andy, you've been making some visits.
Well, as a father of 3 girls in the school system, did have the opportunity to obviously go to Roundtree, and my oldest daughter started at Pipkin, so we took a tour of Pipkin and helped a couple of students open their lockers. That was a big thing for the 6th graders, figuring out how to actually open their lockers. And then just today took a tour of Reed. I also went through Westport on, I think, first day of school. Certainly Reed, and as we're all aware, Reed and Pipkin, and I think having been through Jarrett in the past, small schools, small classrooms, and boy, they're doing great work over there. But I know they've been right on the top of our list of things that we need to do as a board, and boy, they remain on top of that list. So they're doing great things, but I'd certainly like to see them get some assistance with those space considerations.
Anyone else? Denise?
Just mention I had the opportunity, I think, on Tuesday before school started to visit 6 elementaries, which was a real unique opportunity because it allowed me to talk to teachers without the little ones in the room, without their students there. So I was able to really visit with them about some things and some great things that are going on for them and how excited they were for the school day to begin. One of the things I do want to mention, I know that our faith-based community and agencies have been very helpful in all our buildings with painting and supplies, but one thing I do want to mention is that at Sherwood Elementary, one of their partners, Macedonia Baptist Church, had provided supplies in very nice little packets for each child by grade level. They had tied a little ribbon on the packet based on the grade level. So when the parents came to meet the teacher the morning, I think it was on Tuesday morning, every child's desk with their little nameplate was their packet of all the supplies. And it was very emotional for some of the parents because they looked at that and they thought, I have 3 and some 4 children in this school, and my school supplies are taken care of for all 4 children, and now I can use that money to buy new clothes and shoes. And it was extremely emotional, time, but it was just terrific what our community's doing to step up and help our schools. But then on Wednesday, 2 high schools, I had a chance to see some of the Project Lead the Way classrooms, some of the new genetics classrooms, which was a strong pull for me to want to be in that classroom on a long-term basis. And then on Thursday, 6 more elementary, middle schools. So it was just great fun. The teachers were so excited and enthused, and many of them I would ask, how many students do you have in your class this year? And they would whisper the number to me because it was lower than they had in the past, and they didn't want to say it out loud because they were afraid it would change. So lots of excited teachers, wonderful opportunity to talk to full-time counselors. One in particular that was at her school 1 day a week last year. She's now there full-time. She already is so excited about all the opportunities and things she can do for children that need her services. And then the other great thing is full-time nurses in our buildings. And so it just seems like we're set for an exciting year.
Any other comments?
Norm and I went around to 6 or 7. I lost track somewhere along high school. We went to middle school and some elementary schools. And it was fun to see the kids, and they were so well behaved. Already, they were walking in the halls and were quiet and had their hands the right way, and the little girls dressed up for the new year, which you all are familiar with, but it's really special for those of us who aren't there. And then to hear about how many English language learners there are in some of the schools and what a challenge that must be. One of the schools, was it McGregor? One of them said that this was the first year they'd had 59.
59 languages?
Students. Oh, students. And,
That was McGregor.
yeah. And so the challenges they see, but how excited they are. The school buildings look clean and nice and so attractive and just a real pleasant place. The cafeterias have been improved so much also, but it was really fun. I plan to go. I've got Scott's number over there. We're going to go around to some of the other buildings here before long.
I know Mr. Lee's been busy with Missouri School Board stuff. So, well, I think, we talked about it at our retreat, trying to make an effort to be more visible in the schools. And I'd just like to thank all of you for taking that time to do that. I know it's a busy time of the year for many of us as well. So thank you. And with that, we're going to move on. And I wonder if we could flip it, because I'd like to wait till Mr. Renner is here for the discussion on the superintendent search. So I think we'll just flip those and go to 4.03, the goals, because we've had a discussion about this.
And good evening, Dr. Ritter, board members. I want to turn over this particular component to some familiar faces. You've already worked with Jill Palmer from QIA, Quality Improvement and Accountability, and there'll be a short report from Debbie Pitts. They are the magic behind the screen that makes the data that we use daily as a district understandable. And I think what you'll see in both of their presentations is a taking of our use of data to the next level to really try to distill it down to those actionable items. And so what you're going to see at the board level is a part of their design for the work this next year, how we take that data and translate it into action. So I'm going to have Jill Palmer come forward and revisit with you the ongoing systems review and the board goals that you have, and then she'll turn the floor over to Debbie Pitts. But what I want you to know is that the same high level of work that you've come to expect from QIA still goes on, and there's been a nice transition from Dr. Goodman and the work that these two ladies have done together that sets us up for success for this next year. So without further ado, Jill Palmer.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, tonight we will continue your journey of your OSR from what we did from the board retreat. And so,
Bless us. Go ahead, go on. It will go very well.
So just as a reminder, at the board retreat, we looked at mission, vision, collective commitments, gathered your input about what you valued and what you wanted to see in yours, and then also prioritized what your goals were for main themes without. And so what we've done since then is taken all of your input, all the Post-it notes that Kathy has typed and sent to us, and looked at themes along with research for highly effective boards and synthesized all that into what we will share with you tonight. So tonight we're going to review your draft goal and indicator and measure, and then strengths, opportunities, improvement, and next steps.
Indicators or indictors?
Is it wrong?
Indictors, that's a little.
Only you picked that one up, Andy.
So, key strengths.
We need a judge.
An attorney. Yeah, we need a
And
judge.
Debbie, you might hand these out.
I hear that word indictment.
Yeah, you get nervous.
I don't even have a law example. Okay, there you go. So the first strength from your input was rigor and innovative for the district and valuing that. The second is continuous improvement throughout all of the processes that we have in the district. The next is database decision making and the action that happens from decision making. And then the fourth, to be advocates for the district. So I'll give you a minute to look over that, and if you have any comments. Okay, so the next part is key opportunities for improvement. And again, looking at your input and common themes and trends that came out from all of the comments that were made at the retreat, is that advocacy is important, but to be more systematic in how you advocate for schools and to be proactive in that. One of the specific examples was to have talking points each quarter to come out that would be a consistent message throughout. And so the next steps on that would be getting a common learning and messaging for those talking points that you would have. A second one is that the amount of data and information available can be overwhelming, which we know with the OSR the last year, the amount of information that you have received has been absolutely overwhelming. And so two next steps on that is to build a shared understanding of the data that would be pertinent at the board level, and then also for monitoring of data that's ongoing. The financial piece that is on here is current this year. We just pulled that, and if you have any questions, I've got a more detailed, broken down part of that. And then the other part that we talked about at the board retreat was the status report. And so what we're doing is asking you to look over this and give your input to Mrs. Callan and get that to Kathy, and then what we will do is look at all of that input on September 17th. But as far as this report, to have a status report on how these indicators are going for you on November 3rd. And that's a change that you'll see with all the programs this year as well. Okay, so the next part is KSM Summary. And you have that on the second page.
Could I just interrupt you, Ms.
Sure,
Palmer?
absolutely.
The sheet that we got does not have the financial information on that. Is that
Okay, we
key?
can get that.
Okay.
It was at the last minute today to pull in the very new
I understand.
instead of last year's.
I understand.
So we will get that to you.
It's up there.
Yes. So on the KSM summary, 3 indicators and then measures that fall underneath of each one of those. So the first one, to use data as a catalyst for action in the district, and for measures looking at data processes for decision making. And you'll notice there's no number there because, again, this is your OSR. We're just helping guide the process. But these are consistent process measures that we've used for every other program that has come through. Another one is to share a scope and sequence for learning about data at the board level and how that will be used and action that will be taken from that for the second. And then on the third, number of shared learning opportunities. This could be a couple of different ways. It could be just a report out, we went to this conference and here's what I learned from that. Or it could be I read an article and here's what I've learned from that. And so on the measures on there, it's 2 per board member for OSR cycle is what, so to get green. So each one would have to do 2 in a year. So that's what that measure is. On the second indicator, visibility was another high point that you had talked about. And so to develop a strategic process for advocacy, and again, that's a process measure. On the second one, looking at communication and appearances. So it's not just going to Jeff City, but the letters that are sent to keep track of those, to be an advocate. And the third is to not have any gaps in the transition when board members change. So to look at your onboarding process for board members and make sure that they know the key processes and the key understandings from that. And again, that's a process measure. Any questions or comments?
I'm amazed that you were able to pull that all together on all that retreat.
Yeah.
So the 0 to 50 would be 50%. Oh,
50, those are percent.
Those are percents. And the others are
And they're
actual
subjective,
numbers.
just like every other program that we've brought through. It's opinion of the program lead.
Are there any questions of the key success measures summary?
I have one. Go ahead. Mrs. Palmer, on number 2, community visibility and communication tools, and then measures 2, number of communications appearances. Do we need to further define that?
Yes, yes. And that's just guiding the process. So definitely have a definition of what that would be.
So it could be phone calls, emails to legislators. It
Right,
could
and
be the types of things that we discussed tonight. It could be Mr. Lee's involvement
Right.
at the state level.
And it could be tied to your message that you want to say. So you're not just making an appearance at an elementary school to say hello to the teachers, but I'm sharing a common message that the board has agreed upon. So more personable, more strategic on that.
I guess the only thing there is sometimes we don't have the chance to really talk, and sometimes our presence is a message in and of itself. So I guess, there might be some opportunity.
So there's a way to record that.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're asking not for us to define those tonight, right?
No,
Okay.
this is just a draft to say, here's where your input, here's where we're at right now, and then we'll finalize it on the 17th.
Okay.
Okay, so the next step tonight is to look at the process for all the programs to come through this year. Again, looking at your findings that you had talked about at the board retreat. Lots of the data was overwhelming. There's a lot of it. There's a lot of programs that come through. 6 in one night was too many, and so we have listened to that and devised a new schedule, which you have in your packet. So the first OSR is scheduled to go to Cabinet on August 26th, and there's 3 a month. And so you will see the first ones on September 17th. Every month only has 3, with the exception of April, because curriculum and information literacy tie together very well. Another response to a request is to have a state of the district. So it would be a status report for all the programs that you would get before the budget process starts. So even the ones that have gone before, but also the ones that you haven't seen for a year. So you would get an update on where they're at. And then the third change, just as far as scheduling goes, everyone that is on Cabinet would go at the end of the process instead of within. So all the programs that they have report to them, theirs would go first, and then their response could be captured in their OSR at the end of the process. So just as a reminder, last year there were lots and lots of data and information that you received. And so this is kind of captures where we were, but I want to share with you where we are headed. So we'll have 3 programs per board meeting and 3 key pieces of information for each program. So the process has been streamlined, not as much information, kind of top level information from each program. So the first one is mission, vision, collective commitments, SP5, and then program description that you will get for each one. The second is the summary sheet, just like you've received with the updated budget. Some of the programs, nutrition does not have this, but if it's a program that's specific to only a certain amount of students, that information will be added in as well for finance, so you'll be able to see that. And then the KSM summary, which this is really the only part that hasn't changed with the whole thing. So do you have any questions or comments?
Comments or feedback? It just sounds like you've done a really good job of listening, capturing, some very varied, I mean, sometimes we don't even know what we're asking for. So it's been nice to see it captured here, and appreciate all the work that's gone in to get us to this point. So, go ahead, Chair.
So if we want to drill down on something, it will be on the website, on...
It is not. It's those 3 documents that we're asking program leads to complete. So if there was more that would be needed, then, and we have something later on that we'll talk about too that will hopefully address those.
Okay.
I would think yes.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Debbie.
It's just somewhere else.
As Debbie approaches, I want you to know that one of the principals used to be her student.
That's true.
Wow. Makes me feel a little old. We won't talk
Join the
about that.
club.
Dr. Ritter and board members, it's really a pleasure to be here tonight. I get to talk about accountability, and I know that may not sound very exciting, but I think after we see some of the changes between MSIP 4 and MSIP 5, you'll be excited too. And you'll hear words that are very familiar to you, like student growth and continuous improvement, and we are really pleased to see that our accountability from the state and federal side is incorporating some of those things that we've known was important for a long time and really worked toward that end ourselves. So with that said, I want to just kind of go over some of the basics on MSIP 5, and my clicker is not working. Give you a little bit of background on that. Academic rigor is really at the heart of MSIP 5, and that's the heart of our learning model. So it's very much in keeping with the SPS learning model and what we're working for toward 21st century learning goals. The history of MSIP in Missouri goes back to the 1990s. We've had accreditation in Missouri since the 1950s, but MSIP started the first cycle in the 1990-91 school year, and it has gone through basically 5-year iterations to get to MSIP 5. In some cases, they were a little late getting the new one in process, so it adds up to a little more than 5 per year. They have delayed a little bit getting started with MSIP 5 as they really took public feedback. And I would like to take this time to publicly thank Dr. Matt Goodman and Dr. Ritter for the work they were doing with DESE and giving input into how this should be created, and we really see that reflected in MSIP 5. So that's been an important thing for us. You're all familiar with adequate yearly progress, AYP. You also know that Missouri applied for a waiver with the U.S. Department of Education last year and received that waiver. And it's because of that that we were able to see now folded together both state and federal accountability into one instrument. There is no longer an AYP, or an adequate yearly progress, or coming from the federal government. Now it's all rolled into the annual performance report that comes from the state. And with the state's layout and the 5 standards they've come up with for the annual performance report, that covers our federal accountability. So that's good news for us also. The timeline is that for accreditation purposes, this will be applied in the 2014-2015 school year. So we'll have, last year was kind of our first trial run at looking at what APR results look like, and I'll show you some of that in a minute, and Jill's going to continue with that. But the actual accreditation stamp on whether a district's accredited or not under MSIP 5 will happen in that year for the first time. The state has established the goals that you see here. They wanted state expectations. They wanted to promote continuous improvement and innovation. We love that second one. Distinguish performance of schools and districts, and to empower stakeholders to see how both their buildings and their districts were doing. The buildings in those districts also receive those annual performance reports. So what's the difference? MSIP 4 had state accountability, MSIP 5 both. We've talked about that, state and federal. Under MSIP 4, there were 14 standards of accountability, and it split the academic side out between elementary, middle, high. Now that's all rolled into one for accountability. They're looking at your map and end-of-course results in a building. So it doesn't matter if you have both elementary and middle school in your building. Central is a good example. So the middle years, the Springfield Scholars Program, those students would be folded in with Central if you're in the same building. Now, for purposes of accountability, schools like Westport are considered two separate schools, so you have the elementary in the middle. But other than that, all grade levels are rolled together. And the last one was in the past, and the pictures kind of reflect this. In the past, the accountability from MSIP 4 was really at the institution level. I think it was more the bureaucratic side. It was averages. And we all know averages can be misleading. They don't tell us what's happening more individually with our students. And you miss things when you just look at averages. So now we're seeing individual student growth, individual student performance on college career ready assessments, and individual student attendance, rolling up to say what % of your students meet these guidelines, not just what's the average. So we think that's going to be really an exciting thing. Here's how it lays out as far as just the accreditation piece. There's 140 points total, and they take a %, what % of the points possible did you earn as a district or as a building, and you can see 90% right now is the cut point for being a district in distinction. But it's with the caveat that the State Board of Education may add some other factors to that. Below that, you can see the different levels of accreditation. Notice at the bottom that last year, when we had our first look at how SPS was doing on accreditation, we came in with 87.1% of points, and so we're at the very high end of accredited. And we were excited when we saw that, because we saw that 90 mark as there's our target right now. And when we focus and set targets, we meet them. We know that. We know that with graduation rates, so we're excited about that. These are the 5 basic standards. In the past year we had 14, but this is thinking of it as going deeper with those as you roll them into 5 and go more deeply into what they mean. The first one is academic achievement for total students. You can see that's the large % of points there with 56 out of 140. Subgroup achievement, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a minute, 14 points, and then you can see how the other point ranges fall out. The 5 standards represent multiple measures to get at a district's performance. They also then, on top of that, within the scoring in each one, have multiple ways of scoring. And so it may be that you just did well over a 3-year period. Everything has at least 3 years rolled into it. So you don't, as you did with AYP, say, did we hit a certain mark this year? Everything's on an average of at least, everything is averaged at least a 3-year average. So you'll see, actually this Friday, the 23rd, we will get the 2013 annual performance report for our district. We're excited to see that. And when you look at that document, you'll see these 4 levels. And when you have points awarded, that puts you at the lowest level would be the floor, approaching, on target, and then they are using for exceeding now a 2020 target. The Commissioner of Education, Dr. Nicastro, has set that Missouri as a target should be one of the top 10 states by 2020, and so this is a reflection of their move in that area. Just briefly, you can see what Standard 1 gets at. This again is the academic achievement, total students in the areas of English language arts, math, science, and social studies. Social studies is only at the high school level at this point. That's end of course assessments, American history, and government right now. More end of course will be phased in over time. Kind of makes this old history person a little sad that they didn't expand that some. But Standard 2, getting at the exact same calculations the exact same way, but using it applied to subgroup students only. When they look at academic achievement, here's where... Yeah, go ahead.
This question on when it says full academic year.
Yes.
Is that full academic year in the district or at the school?
Great question. For the school, it would be calculated separately from the district. So a full academic year is if you're here for official enrollment time at the end of September and you're there until the test time, half the time plus 1 day. That's how they calculate full academic year. So if you're in the building, let's say you transfer from Westport to Weller. during the year. And let's say you do that in February. You won't count for either building on APR unless you were there more than half the time, so maybe January, better example. You will count for the district because you were in the district a full academic year. So you might not count at any school if you weren't at either school one day over half, and you may have to have 3 schools to actually get at that point if you've moved around. We certainly have with our mobility those cases.
I was going to say, so a child who's very mobile, which we know we unfortunately have a growing number of those students, their individual numbers could be lost if they don't stay at a school long enough.
For that school. They would not be counted for accountability at that school. They would be for the district. So the number of students is going to vary depending on that. That's a great question, and that's how they've done it in the past also. That part's not really a new piece. So looking at the different ways of saying how academic performance comes out, we kind of think about it almost like in the past we had to do a high jump. If we were at track and field events, you got the high jump, did you make that mark or not? But if you think about marathon runners and others who may compete in track and field events, this gives credit now on both growth and status. Did you hit the mark looking at a 3-year average? Did you have individual student gain or growth like that marathon runner might have? In the middle, you see increased performance. That's looking at your district or your building. So think of that as a institutional increase, more or less, or a building or district increase. This is the composition of the subgroup. You can see the 5 included in the subgroup. This is a change. In the past, they had separated out these plus other subgroups. If you had at least 30 students in your district who met that, then they were counted for accountability purposes. Large districts are used to having this come out where you had lots of different groups that might be held to accountability. Small districts, this may be a new thing for. This will put them over the 30 for subgroups. Student who falls within more than one of those groups will be counted only one time. So you're either in the subgroup or you're not in the subgroup.
So there's not a minimum, or there's not a minimum number.
There still would be a minimum of 30. Correct.
Still 30.
You don't get hit twice.
All those things.
Right.
Oh, so if you had 6 in each of those, then you have a subgroup.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you have 30 free and reduced lunch in your school, then
That's going to be a big challenge to districts that have traditionally not had. That's going to be interesting.
Correct. Yeah. We'll see a change there for sure.
Yeah.
Well, then do we lose some abilities to kind of further differentiate where we're perhaps not?
No, good question. We still get the data back for each subgroup, but we will only be held accountable on what they call the super subgroup. Yeah. Looking at college and career ready, it really breaks this into 3 parts. The first one is the percent of graduates at or above the state standard on an approved assessment for college readiness. ACT, in the past they looked at average ACT scores. Now they're looking at percent of students who score at certain levels. There's different points awarded for the percent of students at different levels. You do get some credit just for students taking any of those assessments, like the ACT or the ASVAB or the SAT. You get more credit with a break point on ACT at 18. And then there's another break point at 22 and another at 26. The second area is on percent of graduates who have, during their high school years, been preparing for college and career in a very planned way. So those students who have taken dual credit classes, those who have been in the International Baccalaureate program, those who have taken advanced placement, those kinds of things. Project Lead the Way. This is a new one, that Project Lead the Way will be a part of that. We were very pleased to see that. And then the last one, the percent of graduates who, in the graduate follow-up, are in a college setting, 2 or 4 year, or in the military, or they're in a career that their career ed program in high school prepared them for. So all those count.
That's all self-reported, though, right? Is that?
Well, it's changing. DESE now buys a list that's like they work with the universities. Actually, DESE doesn't. They purchase it, but the universities, and it's 90-some% of universities in the country.
All feed into a database or
all
something?
go into a database, and so that has helped us track ours in that way. The DESE has provided that. So we might not know that someone, had gone to Reed College or wherever.
Is that all, when you say 90% universities, 90% of public universities?
And private.
And private. Well,
And
there wasn't.
private.
I know at one time there was a problem with privates
Right.
getting into data. So
They've
that
added
is-
to it. In the last that I read about last year, they had added privates, and they were a little over 90%. So, attendance rate standard 4 is
We have a
very.
couple
Oh, pardon me.
questions Before we get lost in the.
Sure.
Does our A-plus students enrolled in A-plus program fit anywhere into those categories?
Not just for being an A+ that I'm aware of. Now, if they are in a class that's being offered for dual credit in any way, they will count. And you don't have to actually pay and take the dual credit. If you're in a class where one person is and it's been sanctioned as dual credit, DESE will count everyone in that class. So that's kind of nice to know. Whoops. So on our attendance rate, very straightforward, looking for the target of 90% of students to have an attendance rate of 90% or higher, based on their hours of attendance. And last but not least, graduation rate. This one changed. They first said it would just be based on a 4-year rate, and they heard back from districts about needing to keep an incentive to get students back who may have dropped out of school and add that 5-year rate back in, because they see we're really going to be kind of shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't. And they added it back in. They'll take the better of the two, which of course is almost always your 5-year adjusted rate. If you have questions about MSIP 5, there's lots of opportunities to get help.
We'll call you.
You can call me, and I'm going to get to that in the next slide because I hope you do. This kind of gives you some information from DESE. They've posted lots of good detail. They came out this summer with a 102-page document that's got all the ifs, ands, or buts in here, and you're more than welcome to read through it with me. But it's truly been very helpful. I appreciate the fact that they went through and were very careful about it. So if we have a question, we can find the answer, and I appreciate that very much from them. So with that said, knowing that data gets to be very confusing, and we've been talking about that, I want to turn it back over to Jill Palmer to talk to you about data bytes. And there's also a slide at the end that gives you our contact information. I would urge you, as you get the APR reports coming out on Friday, if you'd like to talk individually, feel free to give me a call or come by. We've reserved time on the schedule to be sure that we can go through that with you. And when you see the numbers in front of you, it helps a lot of time to kind of go through it at that point. So I appreciate your very patient listening to accountability and APR.
Well, thank you for that thorough report, because I think oftentimes, especially as things change, and we just get used to the measurements and lingo of one MSIP, and then it changes to the next cycle. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. There's always a learning curve. Any questions?
Debbie, overall, it's an improvement.
Absolutely,
Great
I think.
improvement.
In my opinion, it's a great improvement.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it gets at the heart of education much better than what we've had in the past.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to follow up with Mr. Lee's comment about being able to drill down, another theme that came out throughout the OSRs was where's the academic data, and OSRs need to be tied to academic data. And sometimes that's very difficult to do because facilities, for example, is very good at responding to the needs in a building, but to be able to have research that compares how that directly affects the test score is very difficult. So hopefully we have a solution to get at that. And so here is a proposed calendar for information that you will get throughout the calendar year. Tonight you'll have some examples of it. And this goes through either when the windows close for our performance series assessment, or when pertinent data comes out, or if official scores come out throughout the calendar year, that you will be updated in that. And the other part is additional data that has been aligned to support what's in the assessment data. So to give more understanding of who was tested by that, or kind of more understanding of what actually feeds into the assessment data. So for an example, this is achievement data from last year, 2012 results from MSIP 5. And the 5 standards are there, and then our total, as Debbie had shared, 87.1. And how these reports will come out, strengths, opportunities, and then next steps for us. And as you'll see on the next slide, sometimes it's not a strength or an opportunity, it is what it is. And so we'll make observations and then next steps from there. Another note about this, sometimes data is official and sometimes it is in-house data that we look at constantly just to monitor our processes. So on the next one, demographic data, this is our enrollment that we had as of yesterday. And so this is not our official enrollment that goes to DESE, but it's tracking where we're at right now. And we've increased by 252 students from the last week, from the first week last year to the first week this year. And so these are just little pieces that you'll have that I think will help support your common message whenever you're wondering what the most current data is to help get that common theme. Any question about data bites?
Go ahead, Mr. Hosmer.
We go back to the
MSIP?
achievement data. Yeah. And I'm sure this is being done, but I want to reiterate, for years we chased the AYP. And for years we talked about why the hell are we chasing AYP. So I want to make sure that even though this is an improvement, that what we're chasing is what we want to be chasing, as opposed to trying to check off what MSIP 5 says we need to check off on. Because when you start focusing on something, things start to fall in line below that, and your system starts focusing on that. I want to make sure that what we're focusing on is what needs to be focused on, as opposed to what MSIP 5 tells us to focus on.
Right, and I think you'll see the themes within that because it gets more granular as we go down, especially in February, January, March, to see what we're actually doing as far as interventions to improve scores. So you will see those as well at, again, at the district level, but what are we doing for students, because literacy is our focus, and you'll be receiving data on that. So these are just big general themes, but definitely the board focus will be what's reported on these.
I just make kind of respond to Mr. Hosmer, because I think one of the things to think about with that, and I agree 100%, is these are minimums. We can do more. It's like Common Core. Common Core's minimum standards. We can do more than we want to if we as a board district want to do more. And I think that ensures that at least we get to this point, but we can certainly go farther if we need to or want to and make that decision. And I hope we do in some cases, whatever that may be. I don't know what that is, but these are all minimum things we got to do, and not maybe our goal or strategy or what we really want to accomplish.
Yeah. And I just, we just said many times that the federal government doesn't know what Springfield needs. Well, the state government really doesn't know what Springfield needs, and so we need to make sure that as we're doing things we got to do to get our money, we also need to do things that are important for Springfield. So.
Well, and if I can interject too, I don't even know if this is working. I'll just talk really loud. Is that what we're so excited to see is a much more balanced composite results. So we can't take our eye off of increased literacy for all kids in our district, and our challenge and our work this year is to get serious about all means all. Balancing that with kids that are coming already equipped and ready, are we making them college and career competitive wherever they want to go, right? So looking at the two ends of the spectrum and every kid in between, when you look at those balanced measures and the overlay of all of those, we're going to get a much more robust picture of the health of the district. If you just take my temperature, I might be 98.6, but my BMI might be out of control. So what we know is that the health of an individual is a balanced composite of indicators. So that's how you achieve full health. And so it's at least a step in the right direction, and it gives us some actionable items and some next steps to take relative to the work that we do across the system. So it's a good next step, and it's a good way to begin to spring forward into action across the district.
Mrs. Bush?
I know that Mr. Renner, among others, have been concerned about how do we know the support systems we put in place this year have an impact. So how do we determine the success went up? Was it because, and I'm not talking just custodial staff or whatever, how do you determine that the nurses, the intervention specialists, all of those are making an impact? Do you have a way to drill down in and to get some data about that?
I think it's a combination of both between the OSRs and the academic achievement, because if we see the scores going up, the kids achieving, that doesn't just happen by chance. All of the supports are in place in the schools to have that, but to have a direct correlation between that, to my knowledge, I don't know how that could be achieved.
Do you check number of interventions, number of meetings, those
absolutely.
kind of things, so you can
Absolutely.
look at
Right.
contacts,
Right.
that kind of thing?
Each of those programs has metrics that are built into their OSRs, and so what QIA is trying to help us do is make sure that we have constant metrics across. So CSIs and intervention coordinator, even though they're in separate departments, having some standard things that we look at. The reality has always been in a school system, though, that it is a combination of title support and classroom interventions and nurses and breakfast in the classroom. And so what we know is who had those things before this year and what did the needle do? Did it move because of those things? And we can make some educated guesses and we can spend that money more fruitfully based on the data, but it's not an exact science. And I think
Sure.
that's what QIA, Jill is grasping with it. It's not you can't put it on a scale and say, ding, 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 this is the winner. You can say there's a correlation and there's some connection from these items, and so we should probably continue doing those things.
Absolutely. There's some assumptions.
Habits didn't do as well.
I'm going to try and, if there are any, I'm going to try and draw this part to a close because we have some other other lengthy discussions to have. So are there any more questions about this presentation, which has been excellent? Okay, thank you. And Mr. Renner, welcome. We skipped over 4.02 superintendent search till you got here, so we're going to go back to that. Over the next few months, we are going to be busy putting together the framework around how we want to handle the upcoming superintendent search. In anticipation of that, I did ask Mr. McKenna and found out through Mr. Ellis that it didn't take board approval that this could go ahead and get drafted for us to look at. An RFP for the processes that we've used the last few times that we've searched, and that's to use a search firm, an executive search firm. So Mr. McKenna drafted this with the help of Mr. Pelletier in purchasing, and we thought it would be helpful to at least look at this document, and it can go out. This doesn't commit us to hiring a search firm. It just allows that process to begin, which can take some time. And then, so Mr. McKenna, if you'd be willing to just come up and answer any questions about that, and then I thought we could take some time tonight to talk a little bit about how we see the next few months progressing. I know Mr. Renner's been through this before. I've been through this before. Some of you may have been through similar kinds of situations in other entities, but I think it would be good to not put a lot of detail around the frame, around the timeline tonight, but just to get a general idea of how we want to handle things going forward. So
the document you have in front of you is just a draft copy of the RFP for the executive search firm process. Much of the content of the document beyond the first few pages is standard purchasing language, but the first few pages include background information that we want to be sure to get from any interested bidders relative to their company itself, their history, their experience, and their position in the executive search marketplace. Also, the second page, or the third page, actually goes through the scope of the work, so kind of a start to finish, step-by-step expectation that we would have of any selected bidder for the process. And then there's some information on the pricing and the format that we expect to receive that pricing within, and then the process that the board will use to evaluate the respondents themselves to select a specific firm. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. It's just a draft, and we'll make adjustments as you'd like.
Any comments? Go ahead.
Well, just quickly, the introduction and background talks about April 2013 being in the future. That needs to be paragraph beginning in 2009.
Okay. So you're talking about the last sentence?
2013 voters will be given the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Okay. We can fix that.
I got a question. Chris said that this doesn't, sending out this RFP and beginning this process doesn't bind the district to even do an executive search firm, or doesn't bind the district to any particular search firm. I'm confused.
I think both of those statements are true. You're asking for interested bidders to come forward and present proposals to you. You don't have to select any of them if you don't want to.
All right. The only other, I mean, it looked fine to me from what I saw. The only thing, and I don't know where the percentages of how we evaluate the bids
Page 4.
comes from. Is that a
Page 4.
Yeah.
That's page 4, evaluation criteria? My only thought on that, if that's something that is open to board discussion or choice, I don't know why price would be 20% of the evaluation criteria. I'd certainly like to see that. I don't know that price should be have that much of a impact on who we would choose.
So if one was 60,000 and another one was 20, you don't think that should play in?
I think past performance and the ability of the bidder, I think they're already a little bit, they're weighted higher as it is, but I think 20% for price is high for me.
I would agree with that. Could I assume this is a professional selection process, correct? Is this a professional selection process?
Tell me what you mean by that.
We don't have to go with the lowest bid, you mean?
Oh, yes.
Exactly.
You're correct. Yeah.
Because that to me, yeah, I want the best. Now, price has got to play into it when you select it. But I'm not going to. That's not my first criteria I look at, and I tend to agree with Mr. Hosmer that 20% may be a little high if it's even in the first cut. I don't know. I mean, I've done it where there wasn't even in the first cut. You looked at the best 3, and then you worked through the pricing after you did that. I'm not saying change it. I'm just saying I've done it both ways. But
how do other people feel? Do you feel that's too high? I guess I would agree that, I mean, these are probably going to be a variation of tens of thousands of dollars, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think in the overall scheme of things, it's probably not as significant.
I like Jerry's proposal about taking it out of the first round and getting the best of the best, and then spending some time looking at price. And if you've got 3 that are equally good, then we can.
I'll ask Parker this. Do you find sometimes if you don't ask about price up front, do you have any sense do you get inflated numbers or not?
Well, this is a unique search, a unique RFP. I did speak to a couple of other districts as we worked through the process of developing this draft, and the biggest piece of advice we got was just be clear about the pricing structure you want. So do you want a fixed structure? Do you want a variable structure based on the salary of the superintendent that's hired? There are various structures. So I think if we're clear about that up front, that's the biggest component. I have not ever seen a vendor submit an RFP that didn't identify clearly what their expected compensation was for their services. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think what's most important is being clear about what we expect in terms of the structure.
Chris, do you have any input based on your past experience with that?
Not on. I don't think price was there when the search firms came and made their presentations. It was after they made their presentations to us that, I mean, that wasn't part of the criteria when we chose however many we chose to make actual presentations to us. The price was not. Now, once they made their presentation, they were ones chosen, then that was part of it.
So there was no you remember there not being any comparison in price?
Not when we chose the ones that...
The initial ones to come.
The finalists.
So would people feel comfortable just having the first round not have a price component and then have that be part of the presentation and yeah. Okay. And then in terms of timing, it looks like, and I don't know because I don't do this kind of work, but it looks like we'd be sending this out tomorrow. Or close to it.
Yeah, no,
and,
I mean, we'll make the changes and get it out as quickly as possible.
So we're giving firms less than a month or just about a month to respond. Is that's...
They're going to wait till the last week anyway.
They're going to wait till the last okay.
Nice, put Springfield.
They've already got it put together.
Yeah, right.
All they got to do is change the name.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate the staff's work on this. I know.
Go ahead. Let me ask about if under scope of work, if we put these things in there, but then we're still going to have discussion on points of this, correct?
Right, but how we want to frame, like.
Okay, so this is just to send out there. So at a later date, we're going to discuss the actual
process
there's
of
a
how
couple
we
things
want.
in scope that I'm not sure about there, but if it's put out there and it's on it, I think then they're all responding to it. But what we do here, I think, we may want to do some things that before we've asked them to do that I'm not sure we should have. We haven't had the input we need to at certain steps. And we've allowed them to do that without any.
But that would probably be part of the negotiation with the company we chose, right? How we'd want them to do the work.
Well, my only thing though is if they make presentation on price and we say, oh, X out that, we don't want you to do it, then their price might be lower. If it was a great deal of work they were going to have to do and we said, no, we don't really want you doing that, or here's
which I think is a really important part of the second step maybe, because I assume we're going to send this out, we'll get 20 responses. We'll narrow that down to 3, or I don't know what number, 3, and I think that's when you really got to talk about the specifics of what you want them to do after you've identified those 3 top firms based on their experiences and results, and then you get down to talk about what are we looking for, what are we expecting to do specifically, and then the price comes out with those.
And I see us using that first meeting in September, maybe putting some framework around things tonight, but using that first meeting in September under strategic discussion. Is everybody going to be here then? You will not?
I will not.
You will not either? Oh, me. What'd you say, Mrs. Linton?
No, we were just talking about strategic
well,
discussion.
we may need to schedule like a special dinner meeting or something just to talk about this. So we'll I think just getting this out and going is
first step.
First step. Go ahead.
I think in the finalist interviews, you can have a dialogue about what they think, what they've seen, and have an interaction so that we may think we want to do something, but they have some background, some knowledge, something to contribute that might change their mind. So I think that the final interviews will give us a dialogue that will help us define those issues. We don't want to get too detailed at this point.
I think the one thing that, and I know we did this last time, I think it was helpful. There was a group of 3 board members who volunteered to read through the RFP responses and come with a recommendation to the rest of the board. I know Mr. Renner, I think Dr. Homan and I did that last time. And I think that if people agree to that, I think that's kind of a good way to do it. So are there people that would be interested in serving in that capacity? I imagine.
Expertise in it, but I'm happy to help if necessary.
Bruce, you want to do it too? Okay, since you've been through it. And Denise?
As needed.
Okay, well, start there. And I mean, there'll be plenty of opportunities for us each to have a role in this. And I guess the only other thing that I'd like to kind of determine tonight, we don't have to, and it's just because I've had a couple calls and inquiries about people volunteering to be on the search committee. And I think we need to decide as a board, are we the committee, are we the search committee, and we work with whoever we're working with to make sure that adequate input is given from all stakeholders, but we maintain that kind of committee as a whole, or do we want to have a larger committee? And I don't know if anybody has any opinions about that, but I do, but I'm sure there's some other ones. But, Jerry, you want to go first?
No. I think that's our responsibility to be the committee of the whole for the search, but I think it is our responsibility also to get input from the stakeholders in whatever fashion is the best way to get the input from the stakeholders. That's what we're looking for, so that we can help devise what criteria when we do start looking at actual candidates. But I think that is our responsibility, not anybody else's, with input from stakeholders.
Annie, do you have any input?
I'm really concerned that we have adequate input from the whole community and various parts of the community. I wonder about maybe perhaps a couple of people just coming together to identify various ways, and it's going to take various ways of getting input, and to look at what the city's done and the universities have done in terms of getting public input and come up with a suggestion for the board on the best way to do that.
I'm wondering if that's something that we could ask the search.
It's in there.
It's in there. I noticed that, and, right, because I think there are probably even more creative ways than even 9 years ago. But yeah, and I think at that point, contacting the other entities that have gone through the process and making sure things that have worked well, replicating that.
Your question is, how do we get the input, not the fact that the board's not making the.
I'm talking about how do we get the
just
input.
The process
once for
of the
board.
input. Okay.
Yeah.
I just hope that we try to include our teachers as much as possible. I mean, I think they are the key drivers in this district, and I think they're the key players in fashioning what the leadership should look like. And so, I hope we keep teachers involved from the beginning and seek their input repeatedly because they're the ones that have to work with the next superintendent more than any of us.
Anybody else have any? But go ahead.
I agree. I agree with everything that's been said. I think it's phenomenally important for us to be the committee and not to try to delegate that responsibility to anybody else. And input from teachers, from taxpayers who pay the superintendent's salary, from other community leaders who will be impacted. I think it's going to be important along the way.
And I know last time, just the way it was handled for those who aren't on the board, the firm that we did decide to use gave us a survey, the board members, about what we saw as characteristics and attributes and experiences that we wanted to see in the next superintendent. And then that same survey was also provided in all the different focus groups and public forums that they had with the various groups. And then those results were compared. And I mean, it was great last time because there wasn't a lot of, it proved to me that the board really had a finger on the pulse of the community, and so I wouldn't anticipate there being huge differences this time, but certainly if there was some sort of outlier there, that's something we'd want to pay attention to. So, okay, so those were the two things that I kind of wanted to get established tonight because I've had some inquiries. I think the other thing is when you start to ask certain people, to be on a search committee and not, I mean, you really risk the chance of alienating somebody or elevating some other body's position. And so I think those of us that are the elected officials are the ones responsible to our constituents. So, okay, great. Thank you for your work. Okay, well, just getting out of my president's, that may be the longest president's report ever.
And
Sorry.
history.
Dr. Ritter, moving on to 5.01, superintendent report.
A couple of things, just to show you the difference as far as enrollment. Last Friday, we had a district-wide enrollment of 25,108. And so I think this is the first time we've been over 25,000
I've been on the board
for a long, long time. And so anyway, and what's interesting is the numbers are really on the west side, west central. And that's really where the new Sherwood's going in. But when you look at Jeffrey's at over 600 students, and then you have Twain at over 500 students, and then we have a Man that has grown quite a bit. Sherwood is showing some big numbers, as well as Westport. So, but that doesn't mean we don't have also pockets of numbers of students as well. You're going to hear from Dr. Hackenworth later, where we're going to need some help as far as some FTE to help us with some kindergarten and things like that. We are pursuing the partnership with Boys and Girls Club as far as the new Sherwood Elementary, and so we hope to move very quickly on that because we do need that school as soon as possible. And the Boys and Girls Club, I think it's getting pretty close to ready to make a decision, and we'll be coming to you with the details around that as soon as possible.
So the idea there, Dr. Ritter, would be to have shared space of the public areas, right? So like a cafeteria or a gym that we use during the day could then be used after school for their use.
Right. And some other special facilities. You saw it.
Yeah, they would actually construct a facility alongside ours, and that would be used in the evenings as part of their programming. The benefit of the Boys and Girls Club is they don't have to build those large spaces, cafeterias, gyms, and they can use ours in a shared sort of way. Also, we're able to use their space during the course of the school day when it's not being used for after-school programming. So it's really
gives us some flexibility.
It does. It does. It's a really nice partnership. The schools we visited in Toledo just love the partnership.
Is there a way I know, like the Boys and Girls Club in Grant Beach Park, and also which is very close to Weaver? I mean, I would hope that this would start to expand some of those other kinds of discussions, because I know we're tight in space at Weaver. So,
and I think what it will do is it will free up some of their space as they pull students into that area there. So.
Good.
So we will come back to you with that. Also, I want to let you know that we hired over 200 teachers this year, new teachers. And so due to support from the taxpayers in April, but also just retirements, and so we're very excited about the people that we've hired. Very, very excited. I'd like to invite you, and I think it's a very important date, and that's August the 28th, Martin Luther King walk. And it's going to start at 7:30 on the north side of the bridge, North Martin Luther King Bridge. And it'd be wonderful if we could have, we're going to have hopefully students there, leadership, staff. We really need to show respect and pride in Martin Luther King. And so ultimately it'll start at 7:30. The march will go across the bridge and then ultimately end up at the square. With some speeches as well as the actual speech from Martin Luther King. So it's a wonderful time, and by the way, it's going to be a year-long celebration. We're going to be doing this year-long and looking at ways to incorporate and ingrain it, and so it becomes a 12-month celebration as opposed to just a one event. Another thing I mentioned last time, I gave it to you. This is the book I've challenged all leadership to read. And it's ultimately this person is going to come. His name, Blake Mykowski. Did I say that right this time? Yes, I did. Anyway, going to come and speak. Outstanding. It's going to be November 11th And so if you want a copy of the book, or if you want to read it and then give it to another board member, you're more than welcome to have. I have extra copies.
He's the individual that started Tom's Shoes.
Tom's Shoes, yes. A wonderful book. Very entrepreneurial, very creative, a lot of good leadership discussion as well as collaborative type of discussions. And so anyway, if you could put that on your calendar, but also if you want a copy of the book, I have it for you. You can take this one if you want tonight.
What was the date? November
11th.
11th.
November 11th at JQH Arena. JQH Arena.
Anything else, Dr. Ritter?
That's all I have.
Thank you, and thank you for your work and your staff's work to have a very smooth beginning of the school year, it sounds like. So we'll knock on wood on that. Mrs. Lewin, are there any public comments? Okay. Section 8 reviews the action that we took at the study session, and I'd just like to point out that our Chamber of Commerce, the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, came out today in support of the governor's veto, went against the position of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and I would just like to publicly thank them, the Chamber, their board, their staff leadership for, I think, a very courageous stance. So they are strong partners with us in education, and that is
that was awesome.
That was very, I think if any of us have a chance to write a note or, oh wow, that would be.
That I know of.
They're what?
Mr.
Well,
Lisa.
maybe I think it's the only chamber that's taken a position on it.
I always told Jim he has a
Besides Missouri Chamber.
smart chamber.
Okay, we're going to move on and talk about the request for additional teachers. So Dr. Hackenworth.
Well, good evening. As Dr. Ritter said, we've had a great start to the school year. Part of that great start has been a large number of students, a lot of them 5-year-olds, in our schools throughout the system. So I'm here tonight requesting 3 additional elementary teachers, specifically 2 kindergarten teachers, one for Westport K-8, one for Wilder Elementary, and then another teacher for Twain Elementary that will likely take some pressure off at 3rd and 4th grade sections. Could be in the form of a combination classroom. So that is our request this evening, the 3 additional elementary FTE. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Move to approve the request.
Oh, okay. It's been moved and seconded, and then there's still a question. So go ahead, Dr. Frederick.
Is there a chance that you may be coming back to us asking at some point in time for additional class? Because this goes back to my visit, and I visited one school that had 2 very full kindergarten classrooms, and we've talked about that. So I'm just wondering if there's a chance, if after the 2-week settling in period of time, is there a chance you may come back to us and need some additional teachers?
Right. Well, I hope we don't have to do that. We try to anticipate in this request where we may need additional help. The school that you're referring to actually doesn't have any additional classrooms. So in many cases, we're kind of under the constraints of the facilities that we have. In those particular cases, we often will place paraprofessionals, either half-time or full-time, depending on the number of students in the oversized classrooms, to provide those teachers some support. So the answer to your question is it's always possible that we would have to come back for an additional FTE request if space was available. We try to really look it over to see if there were any of those opportunities out there so that we could come to you just one time for the additional request.
I do want to respond to that. I still target 18 for every kindergarten classroom. We're not even close.
We're going to have to build some new schools.
I know.
We're working on that.
That's right.
We did make a decision on 2 sites where we kept it that way.
We did. As we looked at our enrollment across the system, what we've done in the past is really look at where we can shift teachers, where classrooms may be a little bit lighter than we would anticipate. We really tried to avoid doing that this year. The class sizes are very good in most cases, and we really didn't want to mess with that.
Pockets, unfortunate. Okay, any other questions before we vote? Because it's been moved by Mrs. Bush and seconded by, was that you, Dr. Prater? That the board approve the addition of 3 elementary teacher FTEs.
on a related note, I've heard lots and lots of compliments about the added support for teachers, the nurses, counselors, paras. We've heard it in almost all the sites we've been in, so very appreciative teachers. Thank you.
That's coming from teachers.
Moving on, Dr. Chodas. Mr. Chodas.
Thank you. Earlier we held the annual levy hearing. I hope you didn't blink, because if you did, you missed it. In April 2013, by vote of the public, a 20-cent levy increase was approved. This 20 cents will be phased in over 2 years, 10 cents in the current year and 10 cents next year. The 2013 calculated levy reflects the requirements of the state's tax levy calculation, and this calculation takes into account several data points, including assessed values, the CPI, the voter-approved increase, and House Bill 506. Assessed value takes into account real property, personal property, and new construction. While assessed value in some of the areas did increase, there was a decrease of 1.5% in the adjusted assessed value, which is used for the tax calculation. And I've included in here a brief description of House Bill 506. I won't read that. Number 7 is the detail on the levy computation. It shows an adjusted operating levy of $3.3995. In addition, there's the 51-cent debt service levy for a total levy of 3.9095. The 51-cent debt service portion of the levy was approved by vote of the public in April 2006. The 2013-14 operating budget for current taxes is $108,770,000. While this levy, the 3.9095, would result in gross revenues of $112,183,500, that amount would be reduced by the fact that we don't collect 100% of the levy, as well as delinquencies and county fees. And at this time, we ask that the board approve the estimated ad valorem property tax operating levy for 2013 of $3.3995 per $100 assessed value, and the distribution of the levy between the statutory funds. And it shows the general fund at 1.9377, the teachers fund at 1.4618, in addition to the 51-cent debt service levy for a total of 3.9095.
Are there any questions of Mr. Chodas? Again, just a thank you to our community for continuing to support and get our levy up to where we, feel it needs to be. Probably still have a little bit of room to go, but we're making progress. So, is there a motion?
I'll move for the acceptance of the staff recommendation of the tax levy as stated.
There's Mr. Lee. You want to second that? Okay. So moved by Dr. Prater and seconded by Mr. Lee that the board approve the estimated ad valorem property tax operating levy for 2013 at $3.39995 per $100 assessed valuation, and the distribution of levy between the statutory funds. Motion passes. Mr. Chodas, Treasurer's Report.
Thank you. If you look at the second page, you'll see the financial statement for the operating funds. This is for July, the first month of the new year, so not a lot of information at this point in time. I will point to the fact that the total revenue is trailing last year after the first month, 3.38% to 5.83%. The culprit being the federal revenue, which you can see We've collected 2.49%, whereas at this time last year it had been a little over 29%. This is essentially a timing difference for the Title I funds.
Okay, it doesn't have anything to do with sequestration or anything like that?
It does to some extent.
Just the way it's being
provided? No, not the timing of
okay.
it. And after 1 month, the expenditures are tracking fairly close to where they were at this time last year. I'd like to point the board to the next page, which is a new report. It is identifying budget differences between revenue and expenditures, the differences from 1 month to the next. So since this is the first month of the year, we're showing the difference between the original budget and the July ending budget. The big difference, you'll see the $300,000. That was for the site-based clinicians. Initially, when we created the budget, we anticipated that those would be employed by the district. Subsequently, the decision was made to employ them through Burl, so as third party.
Contracted.
So Burl hires them, and then we contract with them.
So that expense shows up where then?
The expense was originally in 1,100 regular ed. It has now been moved down to 2,100 pupil support services. And we ask that the board approve the treasurer's
Mr.
report.
Lee?
Yes.
State withholding. Is that the impact of that since July 1 from the governor's withhold? Anything?
As far as those numbers go, slight. By far the biggest chunk of that is Title I being delayed 1 month.
Right, but I mean, I was just more concerned about the state that he withheld. We're only 100,000 under for state revenue.
I'm not aware of any.
It's a very small amount. By actually looking at it, it looks like they may be taking that out of a couple of months periods because they didn't take the whole amount out the first month.
So we really haven't been hit with that yet.
Right.
Any other questions, Mr. Chodes? Thank you for that variance page. I think that's that's a nice addition.
And I encourage the board, if they have any questions on that when it gets posted, if they could give me a heads up so I can be prepared. I don't know all the transfers, but I can research them.
Mrs. Bush.
At what point do we get a year-end report?
That would probably be in September, and then at that time, because of comments made in the state audit report, we will represent the June, July, August treasurer's reports, because they will change because of accruals and accrual reversals.
So the first meeting or the second meeting in September?
Second meeting.
Any other questions? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. It's been moved by Dr. Prater and seconded by Dr. Frederick that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented.
Thank you.
We'll move. We'll move on to the routine action items. Is there a motion?
I'm sorry, I move we approve the routine actions on this.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Dr. Prater, seconded by Mr. Renner, that the board approves each of the routine action items as submitted. Yeah, and going through those personnel elections was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
And really the level of expertise and experience that we were able to attract in teachers was very good. So, and some new ones too, which is good too. How about a motion on the general consent items? These were all discussed 2 weeks ago.
Move to approve the general consent items.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, been moved by Mrs. Bush, seconded by Mr. Renner, that the board approves each recommendation submitted by the administration in the general consent items. Mrs. Luton, any comments on non-agenda items? Okay. Moving on to comments from the board. Legislative report. I know there's been a lot of activity around the veto. I know there's been a draft that I've been working with Mrs. Bledsoe on to submit to the newspaper, and hopefully that will be in the next couple weeks.
Maybe we should put language in there to thank the chamber for their support.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea.
Put that in.
Following their caucus in St. Louis, there's going to be a full court press by them on 253.
They're going to go for it.
Oh, yeah. They're going for it.
My letters go out tomorrow, so
And so
to our representatives.
And so it's just expect a whole lot of flurry.
Yeah.
Now that they've decided that they're going to pursue it. And we have to stop it in the House, because if it goes to the Senate, it will pass.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, just to encourage everyone, not only personally to make those contacts, but also to ask people that you know to also do the same. Anything under future issues?
We do need to pay attention to the transfers that are going on in St. Louis, ultimately in Kansas City. That's going to cost us if this continues. And so I think we need to pay attention to it. Legislatively, it could get really scary, and that could backfire on us, because I'm sure we're going to be held hostage on that too. So just pay attention, and I would suggest that whatever we can do is to make sure that it doesn't hit us. And I know it's going to hit the formula ultimately. So
And when the final or the first round of MSIP 5 accountability goes through, and we've got more districts that are unaccredited, it can hit closer to home. I don't know that there's any around that's that close, but it's not a St. Louis issue.
Right.
It's not just a Kansas City issue. It is a Missouri issue, and it's going to hit us all, whether it hits us directly or indirect. Well, directly, money is direct, but we need to be very diligent on that one too, because it's and the legislature is going to address it. They've already said that they're going to fix it.
Fix it.
Fix it.
I've heard that before.
That scares me.
Yep.
Okay, anything
confident.
else under other? I do want to thank staff and Dr. Prater and Dr. Frederick for working on the outstanding Board of Education
that's right.
application,
That's right.
which is due this week, I believe. So,
Right there's the staff, right there. Oh, Pam, okay.
well, thank you, and for the input that came from the board too. I appreciate that, and for the good work that you all continue to do. Just a reminder to do your plus deltas as a way to improve our process, or also to reinforce the good things that are going on in our meetings. I will especially say I think this is the first time we've ever recognized principals since I've been on the board, and I really, really like
Be a
it.
good-looking group, high spirit.
I just really like that opportunity
That was
to.
certainly the most I've ever seen in 1 year since
Yeah,
I've been on the board.
We should have brought 200 teachers in.
I got to see them that
Yeah,
day.
that's
Or no,
true.
Denise
That's
did.
true.
I got
That's
to see leadership. That's right. Okay, then we do have to go into executive session, so I'll entertain a motion to do that.
So moved.
Okay, is there, Jerry, will you second Denise?
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved by Dr. Frederick, seconded by Mr. Lee, that the board meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss audit findings and personnel matters as provided in sections 610.021, 3, 13, and 17 RSMO.
Got it. I think I have one. All right, I'll get you one.
Did it come up?
No, it's all through.
We don't have to vote.
plus deltas.